Green is the new gold. Our 18-hole Niklaus design, award-winning golf course and clubhouse will leave you green with envy. We don't just say, we do. It's the Stain City way.
Good afternoon and welcome to another exciting episode of Real Talk. So at the tender age of 8, my guest today witnessed what she interpreted as her first experience of black defiance of the apartheid system. Years later, she became part of the student movements and has since been involved in the political battlefield, leading her to forming the political party Agang in 2013. But this is not even half of what she is about. Mamphela Ramphele is a doctor by profession, and adding to these many accolades and posts she has held throughout her life, she was also one of the first South African to hold a position at the World Bank, where she was one of the 4 managing directors in the year 2000. To add to that, she's a thought-provoking author, and today she will not only take us on a whirlwind journey of her life, but she will give us a bit more insight on her latest book, Dreams, Betrayal and Hope, which was released this Feb. Now, I have it on good authority from people on social media and Twitter and Facebook that they cooked early, because they usually cook around this time. They said, who is on? They're like, okay. Then they cooked early because by now they want to be sitting on their couches with their musho and their boiled potato on their laps so that they can watch you in all your fabulosity. So you understand, the entire country is like, yeah.
Well, thank you, Anele. You are a great praise singer.
I am, right? I should walk in front of you wherever you go.
Of course.
Just like rhyming lyrical. I'll be like, well done, 2000. Do you know what I'm saying? So from the Great North, which is what it was called long ago. Absolutely. From the Great North to right here. Every time I watch you, I feel like I can never imagine a time you weren't poised, right? When you were young, were you 8 going on 30 years old?
No, when I was young, I was really small and insignificant. But when I opened my mouth, there was something that came out of there. And the reason was that I was the smallest out of a family of 7.
Your place.
So I learned not to fight because I could never win fights, but to just be very strategic about staying close to my mom, learning to support her when she's cooking or looking after my younger brothers. And so I always got the prime seat.
Clever. Look how that worked out for you in life. Because, I mean, you've been prime seating it since then. You say your dad read himself to graduate levels because he was just a curious man. Would that be where your love for, you know, the written word and speaking and just books as a whole came from? Definitely,
because when I grew up in our very modest home, my father had a library, a little cupboard with all the books of the classics and encyclopedias, but he was also a poet. And wherever you went into his room to take him tea or something, he's either lying on his back reading or asleep with a book on his pillow. So I also got infected by this love for books. So from a very young age, when I couldn't even understand what I was reading, I'd be sitting there with this big book on the floor next to the cupboard. And so that's how it happened.
And so the love for writing was formed. And this is why we have her here today. Look, the plane is in the air. She's in the studio. We'll be back after the break. And if you've just joined us right here on SABC3 Real Talk with Anele, what an astounding guest we have, Dr. Mamphela Ramphele. Now, you have missed a little bit, but not that much. So welcome, step into our office here. Your dad is the one that you say literally read himself to graduate levels. You say your mom was a perfectionist. I want you to unpack that. Like, what's a perfectionist? Is there like a bell at the table? Must everyone eat dinner, you know, with the plates and everything is set and, you know, the knife is on the right and the fork is on the left?
My mom was a very ordinary, village woman, a teacher. Her perfectionism was in the quality of her housekeeping, her cooking, her baking, the laundry, which she also did, and still a great teacher. So that's everything of hers was done to perfection. We used to eat with our hands when we grew up. There was no knife and fork and stuff like that. Only occasionally when my father had visitors would they set the table there for them. But we were very happy to eat like decent African children with our hands.
You know, when you said laundry, immediately the smell that hit me, you know when you walk into a room and the washing has been done and it smells of freshener and they're ironing it and that smell of ironed clothes and perfection is smelling. Is that what you like, you're talking about when you think about your mother?
You know, my mother had a welcome Dover stove. So I'm not talking about electric irons.
Welcome to the black iron that you heat up.
Absolutely.
Welcome to
That's it. And as she's ironing, she's cooking soup or stew, she's baking bread in the oven, and that's how she ran the household.
And like you say, you reading and you can be found in a corner, laying on your belly, laying on your back, you know, getting lost in a book. What you also said, which stood out for me, and I laughed a little because I could relate to it as well as being a little girl when I was, not anymore, is when you said that you read so many books and some of them you didn't understand, but you were just reading them anyway. Have you ever gone back to reread some of the books you read as a child as an adult so that you can, you know, make sense of the words that you know,
well, I reread them once I went to boarding school or to secondary school. Now I could understand. And, you know, at secondary school level, they used to have prescribed books for us. By the end of the first quarter, I finished my prescribed books for the year. And so I'm searching for things to do. So when I go home, I would read every book that I could get my hands on.
By the time you go to boarding school, had you gotten over your overwhelming fear of the dark?
Not yet. But I was getting better. But boy, oh boy, that was a torture.
What would happen? Would you tense up? What did you think was going to happen?
Well, the idea of imagining something will come at you from the dark. I was afraid of snakes because we're living in a rural area. But I was also afraid of ghosts. Okay? And so everything that had to be done in that dark had to be done with lightning speed. And so I would run out to go and fetch water and run back and inevitably break everything that I'm carrying.
And because if you're living in a village, there isn't much electricity, ne?
There is no electricity.
Dark. By 5 o'clock, you can't see further than your nose.
Yes.
So when you go wee, do you run out as well?
No, we used to have chambers for the wee at night.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you made sure everything else is done before dark. Because we had an outside toilet in the corner of the yard. Heaven forbid that I would need to go out there at night. But we had lanterns, you know those paraffin lamps?
Yeah.
That's what we used for when you had to go out for a longer period of time. But I didn't want to get involved with any of that stuff. I stayed inside.
You were strategic. Before 5, you're like, I'm going to go and do my number 2 now. So that I only need to wee.
Yeah.
And then I understand there is an Wompole
Yes.
that tried to get rid of this overwhelming fear you had of the dark, and he took you to the center of the village and there was a big tree. I love this story. Tell me about it.
The story is, as we were growing up, there was this big tree with a hole. You know how trees get hollowed out sometimes in the middle? And this fear of ghosts was associated with a story that the ghosts actually, that hole is because it's where they congregate.
Oh, it's the
And so I avoided that part of the village. Unfortunately, when we went to evening prayers on Wednesdays, we would have to pass there. And I would make sure I'm on the other side, not on the side of the tree. But people actually claim that Paul would sometimes see these ghosts and go and say, hey, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be sleeping and resting. Don't frighten the children. I the idea that someone is taking care of these bad ghosts that are going to scare the hell out of me. So,
And then that was your savior at that moment in time.
at
You'd
that
feel
moment,
safe
I'll
because of
feel
that.
safe because Ompol is taking care of this other world and making sure that they stay where they are supposed to, which is in the graveyard, which was on the other side of the village.
It's strange to me because I feel like today, in today's world, in some way, you step up and you sometimes our own Paul.
Well, our ghosts are more symbolic.
Yes.
Our fear of ourselves in terms of the very ugly past we come from, where we had a color-coded system of if you're black, you're ugly, you are inferior, you are not so important.
Yeah.
If you're white, you're superior,
You are clever,
You're
you
clever.
are eligible, you are,
all of that. If you're a woman, you are the doormat. If you're a man, you are the
You're dominant.
king. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yet, in the home, you see where the real power lies, with the women. And so, as a young child, I figured out these things, but I couldn't understand, why are adults so illogical, right? But now, we have a national crisis. We've got a constitutional democracy that says we are non-racial, non-sexist, egalitarian, but those
But
ghosts,
our reality is
our
the ghost.
reality is that the ghosts of apartheid have come into the post-1994 period, and we are afraid to talk about them because we are ashamed of acknowledging that, in fact, there was a time when we believed as black people that we're inferior. There was a time where white people believed that they are superior. Unfortunately, over the last few months, it's not just they believed, they believe
They believe.
today.
Yeah.
And so you realize that if you do not talk about your goals, acknowledge them, and put
ask-
them to rest.
Like Paul,
Yes.
be like, ghost, why are you here?
Exactly.
Let me walk you to where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we didn't do that work of getting the ghosts to understand time up.
So when do the inequalities of South Africa become glaring to you? Because it didn't happen in 1994. It didn't happen in 1990, when the talks were happening. It didn't happen in 1989 when you said, even Mr. Nelson Mandela asked to move to a cell by himself so he could continue the negotiations. When did they become glaring to you? Because you'd said that although we were poor, we were never hungry. So obviously you're living in a bubble where everything's fine, besides the ghost in the tree,
Yes.
When does it happen when you're like, I'm man,
The wake-up call is this white dominee who was supposed to be there as a pastor of the people.
bringing the word of God.
Absolutely, but he was basically a farmer and regarded every one of us as part of his free labor and threw his weight around. And I knew he was less intelligent than my father, but he would behave like he is the king of the
tribe,
village.
yeah.
And so one realized that something is not right. But when I finished secondary school and I wanted to go to do my matric because I decided that I wanted to be a doctor, this guy, this white dominee said, "What? You, black woman,
Doctor?
wanting to be a doctor? My own daughter could not make it. She's just a nurse. Who do you think you are to be able to do that? And, by the way, your dad is dying."
Did he say that?
Absolutely.
How does he know your dad is dying?
Because at that time, my father had cancer of the esophagus, and I didn't know. I just knew he was ill, and he would be in and out of hospital. Obviously,
He knows.
he knew the diagnosis, but what a way of telling a child about their parents.
What's the correlation though? Where, I mean, if you want to be a doctor and your dad dying, was was he just making sure that your dreams are like stomped into the ground?
No, the correlation is that who's going to pay for you to go and finish your studies?
Okay.
So I looked at this guy and I said in my heart of hearts, I'm going to show this character. And I cried until I was a few blocks away from home. Then I wiped my tears and I got home. Oh yeah, so I didn't tell my mother because I just knew my mother is sitting with a massive problem. I only told her much later.
When you had become a doctor? You're like, this guy, that other Dominic, that clown, that Popeye.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So then where did you study medicine?
At the University of Natal.
And you said many times that the government then is the one that paid for you to study medicine.
Yes. What happened at that time is that you'd get a full cost coverage financial aid package.
Yeah.
If you finish your studies in record time,
Yeah.
half of it is converted into a bursary.
Oh, wow.
And the other half you work through as a public servant. As a doctor, you work in a hospital. As a nurse, you work in the hospital. As a teacher, and so on. So that's how I got my studies
Your funding
covered.
And I'm so glad we're touching on that now, because in your book you do cover the whole fees must fall thing, and it was just such a nice, way to thread it in. We're gonna take a quick ad break. When we come back, because you said something very powerful in your book, where even I was like, yo, okay, all right, we're dealing with a doctor here. We'll be right back with more of this. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with Real Talk right here on SABC3, where the stage is yours, still with the good doctor. So when we were talking about fees must fall, and here's something where, for me, I supported, the movement and, the activism behind it. And then I read your book and it made me think of it another way. I've been in varsity where even if you get a bursary, it's just not enough, because where you buying your lotion, who's buying your sanitary towels, who's giving you pocket money, there's just extra things that you need that sometimes bursaries don't understand. And you would watch children from less privileged homes struggle, and for me to be making ends meet and studying at the same time, it's a step down, for most, and other people just enjoy that step up that they already have. And then in your book, you say that you asked the student leaders of Fees Must Fall that, okay, if fees must fall, what must rise? Have you ever received those answers?
Absolutely not. Not yet. Let's put it
Not
that way.
yet. So the question is still out.
I am a great supporter
Yes.
of youth activism, having been one myself.
Yeah.
And this issue of us as a post-apartheid South Africa being unable to make education high quality and accessible for every child really pains me. And so I take a lot of time trying to understand how these problems are affecting students. The difficulty is not that they are not smart to be able to say what must rise, but Anele, I don't know whether you have seen the quality of the curriculum that young people are getting today, post-1994. History starts with Jan van Riebeeck, please. And then you have, in the poorest places, it even starts in 1994, because the whole narrative is that of the ANC struggle against apartheid and the ANC as the liberator, as if all of us who are sitting here
Nothing
and
existed
working in this
outside of
country were not doing anything. So young people grew up without understanding the mass democratic movement and the achievements of people who were struggling against a very evil system.
So there's many complexities that are not reported on. So you cite someone like Malcolm X and Frantz Fanon, am I right?
Yes.
And as people who were your guiding light when you decided to become a student activist. But there's no internet then. All you have is books. How is their word reaching you?
Well, this is exactly the advantage young people have. They're always very innovative. In our group was a young man called Charles Sibis, whose parents were teachers at the University of Zululand and the University of Natal. So they had access to the library. So he used to make sure that he got all the books borrowed through his parents for us to share and read and circulate. So we were very well informed. So we were inspired by the worldwide student movement of 1968, and then subsequently the Black Power movement, and the Malcolm X's of this day, the Martin Luther Kings of this day. So we're able to understand how other people who were living in very oppressive systems were coping with them. With Frantz Fanon, we got to him when we really got to realize that the most important liberation is freeing your mind from being dictated to by other people. You must remember that when we were at the University of Natal, it was at the height of apartheid. We were in the University of Natal non-European section, which meant in Africa, you have universities for Europeans. So the non-Europeans are the indigenous people of this country. They must go to a little section, which with a residence that was near an oil refinery, which means we were living in the midst of pollution.
Fumes.
And the European section was up on the hill.
Like a golf course.
Thank you. So when we got to realize that the first and important liberation is that of our minds, we looked at how can we call ourselves
non-European
in
Africa.
In Africa. And then, why our names not African names? What about our culture? What about the wigs that we are wearing? What's wrong with our hair?
I'm wearing a wig right now.
I'm sorry. And so it was like peeling an onion. You got deeper and deeper into understanding how our minds are poisoned by what other people think about you if you follow them.
Okay, so here's the thing about being an activist is that I'm yet to meet an activist who's not an extremist. How do you get your medical degree and become doctor when you are so busy reading books, passing books, Malcolm X, Black consciousness movement? What's your balance like? What's your discipline?
Well, a number of the people that were part of the movement dropped out because they were excluded. I had the good fortune of having learned to read very fast. And so I knew I needed to do the minimum amount of work to make sure I passed my degree in record time, because otherwise, how was I going to survive? But I also devoted enough time to the movement, and I was the leading light in terms of what we call the practical manifestations of Black consciousness. Going out into communities, doing vacation work in poor communities. So we would translate our understanding of how oppression works in the real world.
So
one got to mix idealism with strategic interventions, and you had to manage your time smartly.
And back in the Great North, is the family aware that you are half student, half activist?
Partly. My mother, by that time, my father had died, and my mother was very grateful because in addition to the government financial package, because I was a top student in matric, I got additional bursaries from the Jewish women of South Africa, from the Ernest Oppenheimer bursary. So I had change, which I was sending home. So I was a remitter. Yeah, so that gave me the permission to do other
carry
things.
on.
And she said, this girl is sensible, so I'm sure she knows what she's doing.
And in terms of student life, because I feel like there's such a detachment between, you know, your generation and then my generation and then the younger generation. But there's similarities. I mean, as students, no one is balling, no one has lots of money. You know, I survived on 2-minute noodles in varsity. What was your guys' cheap meal? The one where you like, it's not a good month, I have no money, but we all need to eat. What are you guys eating?
The good thing about our medical school is that they had full meals and very good meals. Breakfast, lunch, and supper.
Doctors always get better treatment.
Well, my dear, because we are being prepared to work hard, we are fed properly. So we didn't have to worry about food. The worry was, how are we going to buy that sheep sherry? Oh, yes. Because, you know, Friday come weekend, we've got to have a party. And a party has to have fuel. And that's where the difficulties were, because we had to contribute these little pennies to get our little, some wanted beer and we wanted the sherry.
The sherry
warms
you up.
Absolutely.
Do you know what? I think everyone at home is like, I never thought I'd live to see the day where Dr. Mamphela Ramphele says, a party needs fuel. We will be right back. You know you want to come back. You know. A party. And welcome back to Real Talk. Coming to you live from Stain City. Our guest today is Dr. Mamphela Ramphele. And now I want to delve into a life that we know about her. So when we think of you, there's 2 tags that always come up with you. One is, you know, you Google, you know, your name, and then it says, one of the richest women in South Africa. And I'm like, yo, how much money does she have? Like, do you know what I'm saying? And another one is your work when it comes to the Black consciousness movement alongside Steve Biko. Where did you guys meet? And like the meeting of minds, how did that happen?
Well, that's the circle of activists at the University of Natal. That's where we met. He was a medical student. He's one of those who dropped out because he was more seriously focused on this movement has to be gotten off the ground. And as a student, he used to have to travel to other campuses to start new branches of the South African Student Organization in other branches. So really the chances of having time to study for him were minimum. But also, I don't think he was cut out to be a doctor. His love was to be a lawyer. But his mom said, hey, you're going to get into politics by being a lawyer? No, go to medical school. That's where you'll keep your head down. And of course, it didn't work.
Okay, so she thought that being a lawyer would get him into trouble, which then ended up there anyway.
Exactly. So he was destined for trouble.
And when you look at, I mean, because you know that knowledge, when it comes to you and your children, how like pokey are you in terms of what they choose to do?
No. We are in a different generation. Our children make their own decisions. You simply listen and you advise, but they make the decisions. Thank God.
Right?
I made my own decisions. So what right would I have to interfere with
and
my
your
children?
decisions worked out for you.
My decision worked out for me. And I know that young people have to be allowed to listen to the genius within themselves that points them in the direction they want to go.
Your internal compass.
And so my job is to be a support for this pilot that's flying this aeroplane that they've chosen.
You're the first officer, not the captain.
No.
So this could be a bit difficult for you to reminisce, but who told you that he had passed away, Steve Biko?
Well, that was a very traumatic
I can imagine.
episode because I was 4.5 months pregnant with my eldest son, and I had threatened miscarriage. I was in hospital. And so I was on strict bed rest to preserve this baby. And when the nursing sister comes to me and said, no, you've got to go to the phone. There is a phone call. I said, you telling me to get out of bed when you are supposed to be making sure I stay here? He said, no, this time you have to go. So I said, wow, I wonder what's going on. So the last thing on my mind was what I was going to be here. And when I get there, who do I find? One of the group of activists from King Williamstown, Tenjiwe Mtinso. He says, hey, Ntombi, of course. We used to play cat and mouse with the police. We're not supposed to be communicating as band people, but we did all the time. And so she said, well, are you sitting down? I said, yes, of course I'm sitting down. Then she just said, Steve is dead. Now that is like, did I hear properly? And at the same time, you're adult enough to know no one is going to say something like that unless it's true.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was awful.
Do you have anybody with you at the hospital besides the nurses? Because I just...
No, nobody.
So you went through that alone?
Yes, I went through that alone. And fortunately, an Irish priest who had got to know me when I got dumped in the community where he was a priest, when he heard the news, he drove straight to the hospital and came and sat at my bedside. Every day, when I wake up, he's sitting. When I fall asleep, he's sitting. I don't know when he ate. When he went to the loo, he ate the hospital food that was there. So God sent me that angel to sit and support me.
And when your child was born, did it heal you a little?
A lot.
A lot?
Yes.
I can imagine.
A lot. Because there was this child who looked so much like his dad, down to the fingernails. Incredible.
But like, do you stop yourself from naming him Steve?
No, we don't do that. He got his name the minute his father died and buried. A mutual friend of ours, who's now a retired bishop of the Order of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
In fact, he was with me yesterday at the formal book launch in Rosebank.
Yeah.
He called me and said, the name of that child is Khumelo. And I said, what does that mean? And then he explained to me. I said, okay.
All right.
That was it.
And what's the biggest misconception about you and Steve? That you just want to be like, okay, I think you guys think this, but this is actually it.
Well, I don't know that people knew that I got married to somebody else whilst I was madly in love with Steve.
Oh, it happens all the time, Ma.
Yes.
Do you know how many people are married people they don't love?
Absolutely. And then, of course, that marriage could not work.
Of course.
And then by the time I divorced, he had gotten married because he thought, well,
she's gone.
Yeah. So then, of course, we ended up with this crazy situation that got going until the very end. And the tragedy is that at the time he died, we had sorted ourselves out. We thought, okay, you are banned, but we'll be able to sort this out. He was divorcing, and so we're supposed to then get married, and I would have then had to be able to go back to King Williamstown. But it didn't happen.
Girl, you didn't stand a chance with the charms of a Xhosa man. Every time I think of that story, I'm like, you know this one, she thinks she's a doctor, it's fine. There's no science that can outdo this one. Will you ever write a book and like dedicate it to that life, to that love?
No.
No.
Because I'm not a writer of that nature. And in any case, that is a sacred relationship. So it's not something that I'm going to be flaunting out there.
Yeah. I mean, you've told us enough. So listen, like you said yesterday, you launched this book, right?
Yes.
Dreams, Betrayal, and Hope. On the way, I'm going to dissect it like a school teacher. I'm going to be like your mom now, you know. We are going to dissect, we are going to dissect dreams, we're going to dissect betrayal, and we're going to dissect hope. Come back. And for the last time, welcome back. We're still with Dr Mamphela Ramphele, who has a new book out. She has, I feel like you always have a book out. Are you always writing? As soon as we finish one book, pow, another one comes. I'm just like, just give us 6 months so we can catch up. take a breath and then come back for you?
I actually do. I give you 5 years. My books are almost every 5 years.
Okay, well, this one is out, and I really suggest you go and get it, and quickly before another one comes out in September. So I know you've got this retreat that you go to in Cape Town. Well, you try go every 6 months. Is that where you write? Is that where you find your space, or where's your writing space?
My writing space doesn't come from, that one is for the healing of my soul.
Oh, okay.
So I can listen to myself and really cool down, calm down, and hear the voices inside. The writing comes from more external stimuli. Now, this book is born out of pain, but it is also born out of the undying dream that I embraced when I was a young medical student. And it comes also out of the passionate love I have for this country and the religious belief that we will build this into a great society.
So that is your dream.
Yep.
Let's talk about your betrayal. And you can hit it any way. You can go in terms of what you feel betrayed you or who you feel you betrayed.
I think as a nation, we betrayed ourselves. That's where we start. In our constitution, the preamble thereof, we said we are adopting this constitution so as to, we name 4 things, heal the divisions of the past and the wounds, establish values of a democratic, open society with equality for all, attend to the quality of life of every citizen so we can free the human spirit and build a society that will take up its place as a proud democratic state. We actually failed on all 4 counts. So that's the big betrayal which we start with. But then in desperation to try and refocus the nation on this failure of ours to implement our commitments. I betrayed myself because I've always known that I'm not a party political animal.
So there's a difference between a politician and an activist?
Big one. An activist like me is an idealist. And the rules of the game are integrity, are respect for everybody, listening to the other point of view. Now those are not the rules of the game on the other side.
Yeah, it's not.
So when I got to really come face to face with the ugliness of that space, I realized that until we change the culture within the society where the citizens do what they're supposed to be doing, which is to be the shareholders, the owners of this democracy, and therefore those values which we said we will establish will also affect and shape the nature of party politics. But for now, it's not the case. So I betrayed myself, and that was very painful. But I also think we as adult South Africans, including those of us who fought for freedom, have betrayed our children. The quality of education that we are providing for young people is a scandal.
And you said it in your
criminal
speech,
scandal.
the 5 E's, and empowerment, education, entrepreneurship. But you said all of this can actually only survive under education.
Absolutely. And where is the education? And those young people who were told by those who were mobilizing them in the 80s, freedom now, education tomorrow. Where is that education tomorrow? So we have also failed to give second chances to young people who were active in the mass democratic movement in the 70s and 80s. So I feel a great sense of responsibility as a freedom fighter who is watching the unfinished business.
But how effective can you be as an activist outside the political sphere?
Very effective.
How?
Just think about what has been happening over the last few weeks, right? Have you seen us now having found our voice in the streets? And have you heard today what happened? Citizen action has stopped the nuclear deal. We can do lots of things as citizens. And that is why my focus between now and the time my maker calls me is to remind us of the need to complement the political settlement of 1994 with an emotional settlement, so we can settle the scars, the wounds of being told we are inferior and other people being told that they are superior. We are failing to build this unity in diversity because we have these divides. And we are failing to acknowledge the humiliation, the superiority, the privileges that have been allocated on a color-coded basis. We also need to complement the political and the emotional settlement with a socio-economic settlement. You cannot build a nation where one segment of the nation is super rich and the other segment is poor.
And the middle class are always living in fear of slipping
back into poverty.
Yeah.
And so it is not surprising there is so much violence, so much anger, so much rage, so much abuse of substances, including alcohol. It's one thing to have fuel in a party, but to live in the fuel tank is not exactly what we mean.
Constantly 95.
Absolutely, absolutely. But people are trying to dull the pain of the wounds of the past, or the shame, or the guilt. So I believe the emotional settlement process that we need to have should start in the homes. You know how much domestic violence we have. Must be in the schools. And our children in the schools should be taught about citizenship. Civic education should be taught in our classrooms. We have life orientation in our curriculum. What better life orientation can you have than civic education? And the values we talk about of democracy, open society, human rights, respect for others, respect for the self, all of that needs to be part of that life orientation. And then we'll have young people qualifying from high school fully ready to become citizens of this country. And then when they go to university and they have an issue, they will not only talk about what falls, they'll also talk about what rises.
Okay, and on that note, I think this was the perfect, monologue. There we go. I loved what you just did. I think it's the perfect thing to hear the day before Freedom Day. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. And I was practicing your name so much, I'm glad I've been getting it right. Dr. Mamphela Ramphele.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
Anele.
so much
You've
for coming.
done a superb job. I'm very proud to see a young woman who's really doing it.
I'm glad to sit next to you because you're like the Queen of England for me. I'm almost scared to touch her. I was just like, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
An African queen might be better.
There we go, African Queen. Go get the book, Dreams, Betrayal, Hope. Trust me, it'll just make your life a full circle. Please join us again tomorrow when we speak to author and scriptwriter Pamela Power. Don't forget to enter our weekly competition. Yeah, you can win. You stand to win your chance a 5,000 Rand e-gift card. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night.